doesn't love a glorious red apple? Or a plump strawberry? Or fresh and juicy coconuts? But these were probably grown on an orchard using pesticide, which means they contributed to a lot of destruction before they got to my table.
Now, researchers warn insects are dying off at an alarming rate.
85% of people are concerned about pesticide exposure in food. Are they risky?
The mystery illness is said to have been caused by excess levels of toxins in pesticides.
We have a growing and hungry population to feed. So the question is, can we feed the whole world without chemical pesticides? Everybody hates a pest. And since the dawn of agriculture, we've been trying to keep them away from our food. Ancient Greek and Egyptian communities trained their cats and even domesticated mongooses to keep locusts and rodents away from their cereals and fruit crops. Some European communities were more inspired. From bagpipes to flutes, some tried to keep their gardens and farms in bloom with the right music. But even in the 20th century, we saw ludicrous methods of pest control. Like in China, where the entire country declared war on mosquitoes, flies, sparrows and rats, killing millions of each. Keeping pests away in whatever way possible has been necessary to avoid famines and increase food availability. But pest control really blew up in the global north in the post-war pesticide era, where chemicals were synthesized from organic compounds and used widely for the first time. This was a huge leap forward as crop yields shot up and the developing world had its so-called Green Revolution. Chemical fertilizers and pesticides flooded the market, and high-yielding seeds began to be used across the global south. Some estimates say it saved over 100 million lives in countries that were on the verge of a food crisis. For a while, economies prospered as more people were fed. It seemed like a magical solution had been found. Lately, however, this method of farming has seen a lot of critics.
The one thing you're not allowed to think the Green Revolution is some magical chemical intervention that succeeded in feeding the world, because we've never reached that stage under the past 200 years for sure.
Raj Patel is a well-known food expert who believes the Green Revolution has caused more damage than good in the long term.
Yield is getting more per unit of area of any given crop. Now, you can do that by improving the genetics of the crop and then throwing chemicals at the ground. And for a while, that might work. In the long term, of course, what you end up with is causing all kinds of soil chemistry problems. And so, for example, in Punjab, in India right now, in the epicenter of the Green Revolution, you see soil fertility plummeting.
One intrinsic problem is the way in which pesticides work.
You have this thing that is called the pesticide treadmill. The more pesticide you apply, the more you need to apply. It's almost like a junkie. You get addicted to it, no? The more you take, the more the less effective it becomes, and the more you need to apply.
Yvette Perfecto has spent her career studying herbivores and pests and how they react and respond to pesticides.
It's like us evolving resistant to an antibiotic, no? They are effective to some extent, but then eventually, especially if you abuse them, then you evolve resistant to them. The same thing happened with insects. They evolve resistance to the pesticides. So the more you apply, the more resistant the population become, and the less effective the pesticide becomes.
Coating the soil indiscriminately also leads to other species dying off. In the last 30 years, global insect populations around farms have declined by up to 75%. And that's not all. Runoffs from farms fill rivers with chemicals, and when they drain into the ocean, they kill off large populations of wildlife from sharks to turtles and whales, like in the Gulf of Mexico's dead zone. Not to mention that spraying pesticides also causes farmers problems from skin rashes to long-term lung damage. And the residues that remain on produce can cause long-term health conditions among the people that eat the fruits and vegetables. That's a lot of negatives. But proponents of industrial farming say alternatives are either too expensive to scale worldwide or use too much land, especially as our remaining forests need protection now more than ever. But is this still true? Organic is the umbrella term for anything grown without chemical pesticides. Regulation for what is and isn't organic vary by country, but generally fall in line with natural biological systems and protecting water, soil, air, and biodiversity. Organic farming methods can include introducing natural predators to keep pests away, or growing multiple crops to improve soil health, and even using organic pesticides that are generally less toxic than chemicals. This does lead to more land needed for agriculture and less yield overall. The jury's still out on whether organic food is actually much more nutritious. But what is certain is that organic vegetables contain far fewer pesticide residues and are therefore healthier. But there are a lot of grey areas. Organic farms can be small scale and cater to local communities, or they can be large and industrial, transporting food over large distances, sometimes overseas. So not all organic farms mean local and happy and pure. With so many ifs and buts, how do the two compare?
We had looked at 40 years of all the studies done comparing organic with conventional farming.
Reginald and his team found that while conventional farms produce 10 to 20% higher yields, organic farming is not only better for the environment, but, and most surprisingly,
it was more profitable, significantly so. And part of that reason is because organic farmers get a premium for their food. They get more money for their food. Over that 40-year period between 1975 and 2015, the premium averaged about 30% more.
This high price of organic food can't be ignored though. Eggs cost up to 3 times more in Germany, where I live, for example. Organic milk is double the cost of conventional milk. But at the moment, of all the farmland around the world, the share of completely organic farms is just 1.5%. As this grows, the price of organic produce is expected to fall to make organic food more accessible. In fact, prices have already largely started to fall in the last 10 years around the world. But do we need to cut down more forest, or can organic yields sustain the world?
Our studies show very convincingly that that given the yields that are produced in organic agriculture and the amount of food that is needed to satisfy the nutritional requirement of the human population, that it is possible with organic agriculture to produce enough food to feed everybody.
Many other studies have come to the same conclusion, but with one major caveat: our diets. If people ate only vegan food, 100% of the population could be fed on organics using just the land we already farm on. Vegetarianism would give this a 94% success rate, and a Western-style meat-heavy diet gives this a 15% chance. There is another big factor as well: inefficiency. Right now, 1/3 of all the food we produce worldwide gets wasted.
And we also basically produce a lot of, I wouldn't call it food, but there's a lot of grain that's produced to feed cars, for ethanol or biofuels.
A good example of inefficiency of land use is corn. Most corn harvested in the US goes directly to feed animals or to be burned as fuel, while less than 1/10 enters the food system. So in theory, we could feed the world with just organic food, especially with a more plant-based diet and more efficient farming systems. But do we need to get rid of all pesticides? Maybe we don't need to be so radical.
And it might be we live with some of these synthetic chemicals, but we use them just to tweak. We use them in very small amounts. We use them more as a last resort.
Around the world, more and more farmers are integrating their farms, growing organic crops with pesticide only when needed, or targeting certain crops rather than flooding fields with chemicals. So the question is, what can we do as conscious consumers?
Your fresh produce, buy them more locally, know your farmer. They tend to be organic.
Governments are going to support farmers. They need to incentivize good farming practices. Say for growing cover crops, they should be supported for longer crop rotations to help them do it. They should be supported to convert to these more integrated and organic systems.
The best thing that you can do as an individual is to join a movement. Whether that movement is the International Peasant Movement, La Via Campesina, which has hundreds of millions of landless workers, farmers, peasants, and supporters around the world, or whether it's some of the other movements making dramatic calls for systemic change in the way that we are operating.
The movement to ditch chemicals is growing. And between farmers, consumers, and the state doing their bit, we could one day make these cheesy, happy farms a reality.
Of course, no apples were wasted in the production of this. For more such videos, subscribe to our new channel.